Well, hello, Year 7, and welcome to our new unit where we are going to be doing some programming in Scratch. Many of you I know will use that, more of that in a moment. But the good thing is we're going to be looking at programming games. Yes, you're going to create your own game, which I'm sure you're going to find absolutely fantastic. It's going to be a superb unit. Hope you're going to enjoy it. So, first thing is our objectives. What we want to get out of today's lesson is to understand that Scratch is a programming environment. Now, basically, that just means it's an environment where you're doing some coding. You are making some things happen using code. And you can create games, animations, and other simulations. Now, what we mean by simulation, we'll come to in a moment or two. We're also going to understand today what is meant by an algorithm. I'm sure you've all heard of an algorithm, but really we need to know exactly what that is. And then finally today you're hopefully going to get a sprite up on your screen, write a bit of code to make it move around and bounce. And those of you that are a little bit more able with this might take it a little bit further, but more on that in a moment. So, cracking on. Name some games, okay? Now, there are different types of games that we can think about. There are platform games where you go from level to level. See if you can think of some platform games going from level to level. There are shoot 'em up or beat 'em up games. Quite an interesting term, but that's what they're referred to. Can you think of any of those? There are simulations. Lots of different games involve simulating. Be interesting to see if you can come up with any. There are adventure games as well. And finally, there are sports games. Now, your teacher is going to pause the video now, and you're going to see if you can come up with some games and work out which group they fit into of the 5. Okay, so hopefully you came up with a few really cool games there, ones that are perhaps your favourites that you play regularly. But question time before we move on any further. Firstly, how many of you actually do have a gaming console? Put your hand up if you have a gaming console. Put your hand up if you've got a computer or a laptop, and maybe you play games on that. Put your hand up if you have a smartphone or a tablet. And finally, keep your hand up if you play games. If you are like me, I have a smartphone and I am particularly interested in the game Pokemon Go, and I play that an awful lot. Don't tend to spend too much time doing any other kinds of games, but I game nevertheless. And I would like to bet that every single person's hand is up that we play a game every now and then using one or the other of these platforms. So, the thing we need to realize is that the gaming industry is absolutely massive. But making a game is not just about coding. What other jobs do you think there are involved? Again, your teacher is going to pause the video at this point and see if you can come up with some of the different things that people do or the different jobs that they do in order to produce a game. Okay, so hopefully you came up with some of the following gaming professions. Obviously, you can't make a game without someone that is going to code or program it. Really important here, and those of you that are working with Mrs. Salter, this is something quite close to her heart, the design side, the graphics of a game. Very, very important. Very artistic job. Sound and music and special effects that are audio, really, really important too. Testers, yes, that is a job. People are paid to test games, find the glitches so that the programmers can fix it, or, yes, you guessed it, debug. And then there's people that actually market and sell the games, because of course, in order to make some money, the game's got to be sold. Now, what scared me was when I did a little bit of research. The gaming industry in 2020, 1 year's worth of sales was £907 million. Globally, the gaming industry last year was worth nearly £160 billion. That is a load of money. So think very carefully about this. A profession in gaming, wow, you could really do very, very well. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, exploring this unit is really going to be interesting for you. So, In order to do all these things, though, we need a little bit of work and a little bit of practice. And the first thing we need to think about, one of our objectives, is what is an algorithm? Well, basically, an algorithm is a recipe or a set of instructions. So if you were going to make this delicious dish that you can see in the corner of the screen there, you'd need the variables or the ingredients, and you'd need the method. Without these things, you wouldn't be able to make that. You could have a guess, but you might end up doing things out of order. And basically, when you're instructing or you're coding a computer, you are giving it a recipe for your game. Now later on in this unit, you will be doing precisely that. However, today the good news is we're just going to have a little bit of a mess around with it. So the first thing we need to think about is, what is a sprite? Well, if you haven't heard of a sprite, I'm sure many of you have, a sprite is just a very simple animated character. However, if you have a little look at the bird running across the screen there, you'll see that it is not one character, but it is actually 5 in different positions. Now, you've probably got an old book and drawn a little stick person in the corner of it, and then on the next page drawn it moved a little bit further, and then a little bit further, and so on. And then when you flick the pages, that little character appears to move. Now, if you're really clever today, your challenge is to get your sprite to do precisely that. But more of that in a moment. Now, the very first thing you're going to look at today in Scratch is writing blocks of code necessary to make a sprite move. And there's a little bit of a clue there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a little look at Scratch. And I'm not going to take too long on this because really you're going to learn through experience. So remember, we are not going to help you here. You are going to find out by having a go. The first thing I need to do is I need to put Scratch into the search bar there. And then the first hit that comes up is the program Scratch. Now, I appreciate many of you may have used this before, so do bear with me. I'll be as quick as you can. But for the benefit of those of you that have never used it before, this is how it works. Now, when you first go in, you come up to this page, and it's pretty obvious what we're going to do. We're going to click on Create. And when we get into the next stage, just take a moment or two to load up, you will see I get a screen like this. On the right hand side here, I've got my little character or my sprite. You may want to fiddle around with that sprite, you might want to edit it, you might want to change it, etc. Again, not going to tell you how you do that, you're going to find out yourself. By default, it sets up a tutorial here for those of you that have never watched or used Scratch before. Now, I strongly suggest, if you've never used Scratch, that you have a watch of this tutorial because it'll help you understand what to do. I'm just going to close it for the time being. Down the left hand side here are all the block code commands, and if I want to use a particular bit of block code, I just left click, hold, drag it across and drop it in, and there is my first bit of code ready to go. You'll see there are different groups of code from motion, look, sound and so on, all the way down to my blocks where you can actually create your own block of code that will give a certain command. There are tabs here to look at costumes and sounds, but again, I'll let you explore that. Now, if you've never used Scratch before, the tutorials are really helpful. Again, there's the Getting Started one there, but if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see the Make It Fly. Now, this is a great one to hit the lesson objectives today. Remember, your lesson objectives were to make a sprite fly across the screen or move or whatever. That one will help you to understand exactly what you're doing. There are lots of other tutorials here that you can have a look at. A word of warning, please avoid Make Music because unfortunately at the minute we can't use headphones and it will get rather noisy in the ICT room. But feel free to have a little look at some of the others. I would strongly suggest, if you've never used Scratch before, stick with Getting Started and stick with Make It Fly. If you've used Scratch lots, now's a chance for you to be a bit of a show-off with your skills. So, if I select Getting Started, it will take me back in. Obviously, I will get rid of that. When I've built up some block code, if I want to see how it works, all I do is click on the green flag. Now, I haven't added in enough code, so when I click on the green flag, you'll see nothing happens with my sprite. There are other things that I need to put in, but as I said before, we're not going to tell you that. Now, use the rest of the lesson to really see if you can demonstrate, you can learn quickly, or if you've got Scratch skills, you can really show them off to your teacher. Enjoy the lesson.